The local government news roundup is supported this month by the National Growth Areas Alliance Emerging Growth Areas Forum. Australia is working towards 1.2 million new homes over 5 years, and growth councils are on the front line of delivering them. It's not just about land release and planning approvals, it's about getting the roads, drainage, schools, libraries and community infrastructure right from day one. And that's the focus of the 2026 Emerging Growth Areas Forum, hosted by the National Growth Areas Alliance on Tuesday the 4th of August at Hume City Council Town Hall in Broadmeadows. It's running alongside the NGAA National Congress. For the first time, council leaders from emerging and established growth areas will come together to share what's worked and what hasn't in managing rapid growth, covering organisational readiness, working with developers, building community trust, and making the case for state and federal investment. If your council is facing rapid population growth, this is a forum built for you. Registration is open now to all local governments. Head to the NGAA website, ngaa.org.au, to secure your place. On the Roundup today, cricket pitch management under scrutiny after the tragic death of a local footballer. The VLGA's CEO resigns. Liverpool Council to sue the OLG over an alleged failure to act. A governance reset hampered by a mayor's extended absence. AI traffic signals get the green light in Queensland. A UK council's climate emergency vote delayed due to extreme heat. And we dig into a groundbreaking new report on the use of AI in Victorian councils. Hello, I'm Chris Eddy, back with more news from and about councils across Australia and beyond in a special edition of the Local Government News Roundup. More on that AI report just ahead. Our show is brought to you by the VLGA, the national broadcaster on all things local government, Symphony 3, simple, connected customer experiences, and Rath Engineering Development, smarter local government systems built from real on-the-ground experience. Good morning, it's Tuesday the 7th of July and tragic news to start the show. The City of Whittlesea has issued a statement following an incident at Laylaw Recreation Reserve over the weekend, which has led now to the passing of local footballer and teacher Nathan Fitzgerald. Mayor Laurie Cox extended council's heartfelt support to Nathan's family and teammates and also acknowledged the profound impact on match officials, volunteers and first responders at the scene. The Age has reported that suburban football clubs are calling for an investigation into the safety risks of covered cricket pitches on local grounds after the incident. The council has confirmed the wicket had a concrete base covered by a multi-layer synthetic surface during the football season in accordance with AFL and Cricket Australia standards. The board of the Victorian Local Governance Association has announced the resignation of CEO Catherine Arndt. Miss Arndt steps down after almost a decade of service to the organisation and to the local government sector. The board has acknowledged her significant contribution to governance, gender equity and councillor support across Victoria. In a statement posted to LinkedIn, Miss Arndt said she was proud to have contributed to the VLGA's mission of strengthening local democracy and that recent life events have encouraged her to reflect on the pace of life and making time for what matters most. No details on a process to fill the position have yet been announced. From the press in the Wyndham Star Weekly, Wyndham City Council has knocked back an officer's recommendation to consider a rate cap variation for the 27-28 financial year. A majority of councillors voted to scrap the proposal, arguing that breaching the state-mandated cap should only ever be a last resort, although some hold concerns that sticking to the cap could lead to long-term service declines. The council's new budget locks in a $178.5 million capital works program. And from the Border Mail, Wodonga Council is facing legal action following a cycling accident in its city centre. A pensioner has lodged a writ in the Victorian County Court alleging negligence and a breach of duty of care. The claim states that the council failed to address safety hazards regarding low parking barriers on High Street, despite receiving prior public complaints about their visibility. And Hume City Council has welcomed a $524 million election commitment from the state opposition to duplicate Donnybrook Road and remove the station level crossing. The council is now calling on the Victorian government to match the funding to support the municipality's rapidly expanding Northern Growth Corridor. From New South Wales today, the Sydney Morning Herald reports on heightened tensions between Liverpool City Council and the New South Wales Office of Local Government. The council has confirmed plans to launch legal proceedings against the agency, alleging a failure to act on more than 300 code of conduct complaints filed since September 2024. The council claims 3 separate requests for intervention were either declined or ignored. The legal move comes as a long-awaited inquiry report into the council's conduct is expected to be handed down soon. Edward River Council has decided to end its lease with Ochre Health at the Deniliquin Medical Centre ahead of its October 2027 expiry, as both sides work on new healthcare arrangements. Council says it's focused on continuity of services while it talks with other medical providers and has committed to maintaining and, where possible, increasing doctor numbers in Deniliquin. Ochre Health says it's disappointed the lease is being terminated early, but will work cooperatively to minimise disruption for patients during the transition. The Mayor, Councillor Ashley Hall, has addressed the significant community reaction to the announcement in a post on the Council's Facebook page. The City of Newcastle has welcomed a $12 billion commitment from the New South Wales Government to manufacture the state's next generation of trains in the Hunter region. The 15-year investment will deliver a new state-owned facility, creating hundreds of local construction and ongoing supply chain jobs. Lord Mayor Gavin Morris says the decision will reinvigorate the Hunter's great train-building legacy. An expansion of the Fresh Start Apprentice program will see hundreds more roles created across New South Wales councils. The government initiative is aimed at addressing critical local government workforce shortages and building in-house trade capabilities. The program will fund an additional 400 positions next year, including 200 apprentices, 100 tradies and 100 cadets. And Bathurst Regional Council has secured $1.15 million in funding through the state government's Safer Cities Her Way 2 program. The grant will fund 2 key initiatives aimed at improving safety and inclusion for women, girls and gender diverse people in the Central Business District after dark. In news from other parts of the country, a Queensland government review has found that Redland City Mayor Jos Mitchell's extended medical leave hampered a 6-month governance overhaul at the council. According to the Courier Mail, the Department of Local Government found that the mayor's prolonged absence meant key opportunities to address internal council conflicts and strengthen leadership were missed. A report following the completion of governance advisor Chris Rose's 6-month appointment was briefly available online, including a series of recommendations for governance improvements, but the Courier Mail reported the report has been removed from public view on the local government department website. The City of Moreton Bay has announced an Australia-first pilot of AI-powered traffic signalling technology. Partnering with industry, the council will trial next-generation movement-based hardware designed to dynamically prioritise traffic based on road user type, including public transport and cyclists. The council says the system shifts away from traditional phase-based sequencing to substantially reduce motorists' wait times and lower idling emissions. In Tasmania, Glenorchy Deputy Mayor Russell Yaxley has announced his bid for the city's mayoralty ahead of October's local government elections. Pulse Tasmania reports Councillor Yaxley's platform includes pushing for a new aquatic centre and rewriting the city's decade-old community plan. It follows his narrow defeat in a 2024 by-election by current Mayor Sue Hickey. West Tamar Council is considering a resident poll at the upcoming local government elections to decide whether to return to weekly rubbish collection. The Mercury reported that councillors have voted unanimously to defer a final decision on a potential poll until later this month, pending further advice on costs. The service has operated on a fortnightly schedule since at least 1999. WA's City of Stirling has welcomed proposed state planning reforms aimed at boosting housing supply. The updates to Western Australia's residential design codes will reduce minimum lot sizes for subdivision in R20 zones and remove minimum parking mandates for apartments and granny flats. And the City of Darwin, in partnership with RSPCA Northern Territory, has successfully desexed 60 owned pet cats under a targeted animal management initiative. The program utilised data from the council's cat tracking program to identify suburbs with the highest rates of roaming cats and impoundments. The Roundup is supported this month by the 2026 Emerging Growth Areas Forum being put on by the National Growth Areas Alliance. Australia is aiming to deliver 1.2 million new homes in 5 years, and councils are on the front line planning neighbourhoods and building the roads, drainage, schools, libraries and community infrastructure to match. The forum will be held on Tuesday the 4th of August at Hume City Council Town Hall in Broadmeadows, alongside the NGAA National Congress. Registration is open now at ngaa.org.au. Now, I'll be joined in a moment by two special guests to talk about that new report on the use of AI in Victorian councils. But first, some international news. The Borough Council of Kings Lynn and West Norfolk in the UK has rejected a motion to scrap its climate emergency status. A Reform UK councillor's proposal to replace the 2021 declaration with a localised resilience strategy was defeated by 33 votes to 22. The vote went ahead following a postponement last week when the council chamber was deemed too hot to safely host the meeting. More on that from BBC News, which also reports that 4 Highland councillors have resigned from the local licensing committee following intense public backlash over a decision to let a convicted rapist retain his taxi operator's licence. Independent councillor Willie McKay has resigned from the council entirely, while Liberal Democrat John Grafton has been suspended by his party group. The committee's decision, which allowed the vehicle licence to continue while suspending the individual's right to drive, will now be referred to a full meeting of Highland Council for review. In New Zealand, a major solar farm planned for Canterbury has been granted provisional approval through the government's fast-track process. The Halden Solar Farm near Lake Benmore would cover about 320 hectares, around 320 rugby pitches, with about 360,000 panels, enough to power 45,000 homes. The approval comes despite submitters including Canterbury Regional Council and Mackenzie District Council suggesting the benefits of the proposal are not in proportion with the potential adverse effects. More from RNZ News on that story, which also reported that Auckland Council has been ordered to pay $15,000 to a former leisure centre worker following an unjustified dismissal. The Employment Relations Authority found the council rushed into a disciplinary process over an undeclared personal training business rather than addressing specific contractual duties. The authority slightly reduced the final compensation over an undeclared conflict of interest on the part of the employee. A new report from LG Pro has given the Victorian local government sector its first sector-wide picture of how councils are adopting artificial intelligence. It draws on survey responses from 2,500 council staff across 22 councils. Prepared at Whitehorse City Council, it reveals a workforce that's already embracing AI, but where governance and incident reporting structures are struggling to keep pace. I'm joined by two of the people behind the research, the driving forces, in fact. David Hanson, Transformational Change Manager at Whitehorse City Council. Hello, David.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. And Lisa Ippolito, who's the council's AI enablement lead. Hello, Lisa.
Great to be here, Chris. Thanks for having us.
Great to talk to you about this report, which is not only a sector first in Victoria, but I believe a sector first for the nation. Would I be right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Good to see Victoria leading the way. David, perhaps if I could start with you. As a sector-wide baseline of AI adoption across Victorian local government, why did Whitehorse take a lead on this?
Thanks for the question, Chris. I think Whitehorse recognises that a lot of Victorian councils are dealing with the same issues at the moment. Rate capping and financial constraints, changing demographics mean that we're under pressure to deliver more and better with less as we go on. And AI has a real capability to potentially revolutionise how we deliver services to community members. We found ourselves asking some questions around, how do we use AI? How do we measure it? What does our current state look like? What does the future state look like? And what's our baseline? And Lisa here, the brains behind that initial work, developed a tool so we could actually measure ourselves. And the more that we talked to neighbouring councils, we realised they were grappling with the same questions. So we we developed a plan to work with LG Pro and scale that piece of work up across Victoria so we could compare with other councils and see how we're tracking against each other and where we have opportunities to learn from each other.
Yeah, terrific. And Lisa, you're an AI enablement lead. Just very quickly explain that role and how long that's been in place.
So at Whitehorse City Council, I've kind of been informally in the role for at least 2 years now. It formalised into a position in September last year. And the focus of the role is exactly what's on the tin, AI
Yeah.
enablement. So it's really around working with our staff to understand and navigate the opportunities and the risks that this technology poses, and then to find pathways in which that we will leverage the technology and utilize it in ways that are safe, responsible, and ethical. So, very practically speaking, it starts with often governance and understanding what can we do and what can't we do with this technology, and building capability with our staff across the organisation around utilising these tools, not only the different tools and the options that are available to us, procuring the right platforms, and working with our executive to navigate, what the priority roadmap should look like, where do we start, and how do we actually track our progress? Is it working? Where do we need to focus our effort, time, and investment?
So you've got 2,500 responses here from 22 councils for this piece of research. That's a substantial data set. Was there a headline insight, Lisa, that you think leaders should be paying attention to first up?
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of insights that came out of this report, but the one that was striking was that the fact that there's about a quarter of our workforce on average has found a way to get 6 days of work done in 5. So
Right.
we're looking at time savings and productivity here, and we're considering, well, what's happening with our power users, which is the cohort of our workforce or the segment of our workforce that's using AI daily, and what has been the benefit back to the organisation as a result of that usage. And so what we found is that rather than having more coffee breaks or taking more time to relax, there's actually an incredible amount of output that's coming out of those time savings that's equivalent to being able to add a full day's work to every week.
Wow, that is pretty significant. You mentioned power users there. That's one of 4 profiles that the report has found the spread of adoption across roughly a quarter of the workforce. Is that a distribution that surprised you, or did you expect to find that sort of outcome?
The benefit of doing this work, firstly, at Whitehorse, allowed me to get a really good sense of what our baseline was. So when the sector's results came in, it was, I guess, reflective of what we were seeing at Whitehorse. It did vary in certain areas, but for the most part, the spread of the user profiles kind of mirrored what we were seeing within our own council. Our power users are using these tools daily, and they account for 26% of our workforce. Our explorers are using the tools 1 to 3 times a week, accounting for 27% of the workforce. Our novices are using the tools 1 to 3 times a month, and they're sitting at around 20% of the workforce. And then we have a cohort of the workforce at 26%, which are our non-adopters. They're not yet using these tools and they haven't explored these platforms.
Okay.
And that's the rough spread across the 22 councils that participated.
David, one of the striking findings here is a gap between staff confidence in spotting AI errors and their confidence in formally reporting an AI-related incident, and that gap widens as capability grows. What does that tell us, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably the second most striking thing that came out of the report, that the gap is persistent. What people feel confident in terms of handling data going into AI tools and their ability to spot errors, they're fairly similar and fairly high. They sit around 74 and 76% at the overall level, but their ability or confidence to report incidences when they happen is 62%.
Yeah.
All of those actually grow as people progress along the adoption curve. To piggyback on what Lisa said earlier, when people move from non-adopters through to power users, all of those scores go up, but the gap between incident reporting and error spotting actually widens. So I guess that's the most concerning thing that comes out of the report, that the capability is developing, but people still don't know how to report issues. It's not developing at the same pace. So we've been doing some thinking about why that might be. It's still early days, but it seems like there's a relationship between hands-on usage and the development of confidence around data input and error spotting. But that incident reporting is much more linked to governance and to policy.
Right.
And that isn't keeping pace with the hands-on usage for the other two scores.
Can you give us an example, perhaps, of what you mean when you talk about an AI error and an AI-related incident?
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot of talk about AI hallucinations, and somebody said to me recently, why do we call it hallucinations? Sometimes AI gets it wrong, and I
Yeah,
thought it's a nice reframing. AI does get
yeah,
it wrong sometimes, and
yeah,
the more that people use the tool, the better they get at interrogating those outputs and picking holes in them and understanding when to challenge and push back against AI. So that's what we mean by error spotting. Data handling is the other one I spoke about, is really about the confidentiality of documents and not uploading things that shouldn't be uploaded, which is obviously a key concern for us. And then the incident reporting is when something does go wrong, if something has been shared accidentally, errors do happen. If somebody perhaps doesn't de-identify something and it is shared with an AI tool, do people know how to report that to their organisation? And that's different for every organisation. It's a policy issue first and foremost, and a training issue, and a communications issue as well.
yeah,
There's also probably an element of psych safety. Do people feel safe to report those
yeah.
issues when they happen?
Okay, that's helpful. Now, Lisa, the data is also showing that those councils that have a dedicated AI role, like yours, I'm guessing, consistently score higher on capability. But it's not just the role itself, is it?
Yeah, well, what we found was that, and we looked at the data from so many different perspectives, Chris. We wanted to understand what's differentiating the highest capability scoring councils from the lowest. What were the themes? What were the trends there? We looked at council size, we looked at council type, because, often we assume that the bigger the council, the more money they have, the more capability they're going to have to build. Surprisingly, none of those are kind of the way we slice the data in those particular instances. None of those single handedly predicted a higher AI capability. What we did find was that when three particular things kind of intersect, we see a higher capability score manifest. And the three things that come together as a package tended to be the named AI ownership. So, someone in the organization or a team in the organization that you could actually go to, that's their job to help guide you through those conversations and coordinate those conversations. The second one, unsurprisingly, is formal policy and guidance. So, really having clear governance in place and comms around when we can and can't use these tools and how to do that responsibly. And then the third one is investment. And that usually translates into training, tooling, all of the kinds of things that staff need to get on their way. So when those three things come together and intersect, Chris, we found that a higher capability score was more prominent at that council level. And I think 7 out of the 8 top ranking councils all had that in common. So we were able to start to get a real sense of when these things arrive together as a package, you've got a higher capability score manifesting.
That's really interesting. And those top 7 or 8 you're talking about, are they similar size type councils or are they spread around the state?
And that's the interesting part. We thought that demographics or size or type was going to be the determining factor here, but that wasn't the case. So we were able to very confidently say that if you're a rural small council or you don't have much budget, or it doesn't matter where you're starting, having a focus on those three things together as a package is really going to give you your best shot at moving capability, at moving the needle on capability. If I had to pick one other thing, Chris, I'd talk to the insights we got out of the qualitative data from our non-adopter group. So when we speak about our non-adopters, I think typically people would maybe classify them as, tech laggards or people that need to be fixed or pulled along for the journey. What we discovered with this group was something very different. Quite often, it's around professional integrity for these staff members. They're thinking and questioning things like copyright, IP, and the AI platforms scraping this data, or perhaps the environmental impacts, or a variety of other things that are really base their hesitation in concern. And so for them, they're looking for the organisation to engage them in an ethical conversation.
Hmm.
So what we discovered, Chris, was, because the nature of our workforce is not homogenous and we do have these distinct user profiles, when we dug into the barriers, the things that were holding people back, what we found was that they're very unique depending on the user profile that you sit in. And so I guess the takeaway from that is that if you tried to address that with one mechanism or one solution, you're probably going to leave people behind or frustrate, other
Yeah.
users in that same group.
Yeah.
The analogy that David and I threw around was like giving the same driving lesson to someone who prefers to ride a bike versus someone that is, a car enthusiast. Neither of those individuals are going to find that lesson appropriate or, in any way meeting their individual needs. So the takeaway from there was, sending a mandatory prompting webinar to the organization without considering that there are very different user profiles that would be talking to, potentially for those non-adopters might land as an insult as opposed to a genuine learning opportunity.
Yeah. So some principles there that you'd apply to any change management process, really, aren't they?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
David, at the other end of the spectrum, those power users that obviously are keen and want to use the technology to the best of their ability and capability, they're saying the barrier isn't actually that ability or that skill, it's those other organisational barriers like IT settings and policy ambiguity. How do you deal with that, do you think, as a council?
I think that is a challenge for all councils. I mean, what we're seeing at the moment is that AI is developing at such a rapid pace that you can design policy and there's high potential that it will be outdated by the time it's implemented. So you're absolutely right there that when we get to our power users, they're finding policies that are in place potentially restrictive and not allowing them to get on with the job and find new use cases and ways to use this. I think there's some musings we've been doing is about what does a good policy for AI look like. And I'm not sure that we've landed as a sector on that yet, but something that, Lisa, feel free to jump in here. I feel like this is more in your world than mine. Something that's more principles based around what we're trying to achieve and what good looks like and what unacceptable use looks like without actually preventing usage that's experimental or innovative. I think the nexus between innovation and AI is really where we need to focus in terms of delivering value for community members and long-term financial sustainability. Lisa, what do you think?
I'd say that probably the biggest challenge that any CEO or leadership team or executive team are considering right now is how do you balance that seesaw between the opportunities and the risks of this technology? And so typically, when we think about mitigating risk, we're not at the same time often trying to encourage and experiment and innovate. And those two things can quite often be at odds with each other. So that's the biggest challenge here. It's about how do we encourage innovation and experimentation in a sandpit that is safe enough for us to do that without breaching any of our policies or procedures or the community trust. And that's the conversation that we're having every single day. Thankfully, none of us are having that conversation in isolation. We have an incredibly engaged network across not only Victoria, but in Australia and even in New Zealand. I have the opportunity to work with LG Pro with the AI Enablement SIG. I also work with ALGAM in Australia and New Zealand with the AI Community of Practice. We've also been connected to the MAV AI Task Force. So across all of those different forums, we're collectively coming together to navigate these questions. And there is probably more policy guidance, frameworks, and risk kind of templates than you can poke a stick at. I think at this point in time, it's about trying to move through all the noise that's out there because there's no shortage of guidance on the internet and come up with something that we can all follow in a really simple way. And I think the AI Adoption Baseline Report was probably one of the very first coordinated initiatives that allow us to be able to have guided conversations that are backed with insights. And I think there's many more opportunities in this space for us to come together and collectively build those frameworks and guidance documents and governance documents so we can do this in a way that's streamlined.
So you've described this research as baseline, meaning I assume that you'll do some further collation and collection. What's the thinking on how often you might want to do this?
This is probably one of the most exciting points or parts of this conversation. It's lovely to have a baseline metric that we can point to and say, in 2026, this is the state of AI adoption in local government according to this sample size. But the real opportunity, Chris, is the year-on-year reporting that we plan to do. So in 2027, LG Pro are going to make this available to all of Victoria, potentially even the rest of the nation. So So we can start tracking these metrics and understanding how the barriers are moving, how the enablers are moving, what's the rate of adoption, how are our user profiles making their way up that adoption spectrum? Are there new risks that are unveiling? And what are those trends showing us? So then we can make more informed decisions around where we focus our efforts and investment next.
Yeah. And what about the element of how AI is enabling not just more efficient use of resources within council organisations and decision making, but is there a plan to take it to that next level? What is it delivering in terms of community outcomes as councils get more efficient and more AI capable?
There are certainly a number of councils that have gone live with beta versions of AI assistance for community. So community facing solutions like an AI assistant on a website, for example, that helps you navigate a particular process or connect to a piece of information that's of interest. There's endless options in that space, and every council is moving into those projects and there's no one way to do it, right? So
Yeah.
there's a variety of use cases out there of how we're experimenting at this point. What I think is most interesting is, I'm not sure if you're aware of a recent news announcement in Bondi where there was a resident that built an AI assistant to gather feedback from the community. So then they could easily and more efficiently send Bondi Council feedback in relation to a particular high-rise building. And that's where I think it's going to get very interesting, because rather than us necessarily leading these solutions, we may in fact find ourselves responding to the community's own purpose-built ways of interacting with us.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we've got a lot that we are going to learn from each other, but the community will also teach us what they're ready for, and they will kind of, in many ways, lead us to having to get involved in those projects.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, David. That's been an interesting conversation. The report is available through LG Pro, I assume, for people who want to dig into it and find out more.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Great to have you on the show. Thank you for telling us all about this AI adoption in Victorian local government report. David Hanson, Lisa Ippolito from Whitehorse City Council. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Chris.
And that's all we have for you today on the Local Government News Roundup, edition number 612, recorded on the morning of Tuesday, the 7th of July, 2026. The podcast is brought to you by the VLGA, the national broadcaster on all things local government. We receive support from Symphony 3, simple, connected customer experiences, and from Ramp Engineering Development, smarter local government systems built from real on-the-ground experience. You can find out more about the stories in this episode and a full transcript by heading to lgnewsroundup.com. The Local Government News Roundup is recorded in the city of Greater Geelong, Victoria, on the land of the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation. Until next time, thanks for listening and bye for now. Support for the Roundup comes from Symphony 3, allowing councils to connect their systems securely, to automate their data flows and to monitor performance in real time. And right now, councils are lining up for their own emergency dashboard, like the one that Symphony 3 has created for the city of Greater Bendigo. The dashboard helps keep the community safe and prepared before, during and after emergencies. It pulls together live data, including weather data, traffic data, emergency incidents, unplanned and planned disruptions, news and social media feeds. Visit www.symphony3.com to learn how you can get an emergency dashboard for your community.